This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome each and every one of you to our Shabbat Torah study here at Olive Tree, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we want to welcome those of you that are here today. We would encourage every one of you that might be in watching us through the internet or Facebook to come and join us live here, because we start off with praise and worship. And that's why sometimes people ask, sometimes you start like at 11, sometimes 11:10. Well, we do a lot of things before. We actually start around 10 o'clock over here, and then we have praise and worship. We sing and we pray, and then we have a short time of greeting one another, and again reading the Torah scrolls in Hebrew, having all the kids come up and read the Torah scrolls in Hebrew, and then be able to come after we do all that to come and study. So that's why sometimes it's around 11:10, around there. But we want to welcome you to come and join us so that you could be live. But we thank you for at least coming and watching us on YouTube. And thank you also for the gifts that you all send us, because we are a small congregation. And without gifts from even those of you that have been following us and for several years, your gifts, financial gifts, are of vital importance to us. So thank you for that. Well, welcome to, again, Torah Unleashed. And today we are in the 47th parashat of our yearly Torah study. And today's parasha is Re. Everybody say it with me, Re. Now, again, this is a one-syllable word, Re. I know many times it is pronounced Re'eh, and sometimes you have a Resh or an R and an E there. But actually, if you notice in the Hebrew, the Resh there has a Shva. That Shva is not an E sound, although in modern Hebrew and English speakers will pronounce it as a E sound. That is an extra hurried, a Shva, extra hurried E. And in Hebrew, one of the I don't know why I'm getting into the little Hebrew lesson here, but one of the things is that there are as many syllables in a Hebrew word as there are full vowels. This only has one full vowel. It has a seta there. Those two dots it's only a one vowel word. Again, that shva is not a vowel, that's a semi-vowel. And so you would pronounce this as one syllable, re. Now, you could slightly hear that E sound, but it's not re, it's re. And it means look, mira, look. It doesn't mean just see this or see this. It means look, behold. In fact, just like the word Shema. The word Shema means listen. Shema, listen. But we don't say Shema Israel. We say Shema Israel. When you say Shema Israel, that's intensive. Listen up. Over here. Re. Look, behold. And there are intensive words there. So, re, look. And that's our parasha. It's from Deuteronomy 11:26 to 16:17. Now, what the teaching today is from Re. These are our points. There is a conclusion. Now, the first part of it, what we read in the Torah scrolls today for our parasha reading, is the blessing and the curse. That's the conclusion from last week's reading. What's interesting is that the book of Deuteronomy has an introduction, and then it's made up of 3 sermons. The book of Deuteronomy is a book made up of 3 sermons of Moses. Now, these 3 sermons of Moses, again, they were on the far side of the Jordan. Everything in Deuteronomy, the word Deuteronomy, of course, in Greek, deuteronomos means a second law or an additional law. Now, the book of Deuteronomy, although chronologically is at the end after Numbers, Deuteronomy is actually a summary of everything that occurred between Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. So the book of Deuteronomy is actually another Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers is a chronological from Exodus, from the Exodus time in Egypt to coming to Mount Nebo. And so that is a 40-year period. And Deuteronomy goes back and summarizes and rehashes and reteaches everything we've learned already, Deuteronomy, to that last generation of the Exodus, those new kids that are now growing up and going to enter the land. It's just a re-giving of everything that Adonai had given to Moshe. And so today's first part is the conclusion, the blessing and the curse, which is it's actually really today's teaching starts in the middle of a paragraph. When Maimonides and these people divided the Torah into the parashah, many times they didn't do them when they should have done them. They did them as far as how many verses they were counting. But today starts a second sermon. Today starts the second sermon, which is chapters 12:1 to 28:69 is the second sermon, and from 29 and to the end of Deuteronomy is the third and final sermon. But today's teaching really has 12 subpoints, and we're going to be hitting some of them a little bit, and some of them were not. In fact, the tithe, I think, this year I put it towards the bottom in case we have time. But we're going to go through some of these here today. But let's look at the conclusion of the first sermon, which in Hebrew it's Re. Anochi noten livnechem chayom bracha uk lala. So look, behold, I give to you noten. I give to you before your face. That this word right there, livnechem, is before your face. This day, bracha, the blessing, uk lala, and the curse. The blessing and the curse. Now, go with me there to chapter 11, verse 26. And it says there, look, I set before you today a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim that I give to you today. A curse if you disobey the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim and leave the way. Leave chaderech. Remember, the way of Yahweh is in Hebrew called chaderech. If you leave the way that Adonai has given us. Now, the way that Adonai has given us actually began with Adam and Eve. Adonai gave us a way from the first commandment. The first commandment given to mankind, Adam and Eve, was be fruitful and multiply. Adonai blessed them. The first commandment was the commandment of marriage. The first commandment was about a wedding, about marriage, and about being the stewards, the caretakers of the world, and have supervision of the created world. Adonai gave him. So from then on, a way of doing things, haderech, Adonai gave. And of course, he gave the sacrificial system. He gave the Shabbat. He gave kosher. He gave all these things to Adam. And Adam followed them. And yes, sin came in, but when sin comes in, Adonai provided. If you remember with Adam and with Cain and Abel, provided ways of returning, of reconciliation back to Adonai. Now, what's interesting is that we know that we are told that Abraham, our father Abraham, that he followed Haderech Yahweh. And it actually says that he followed Haderech Yahweh, the way of Yahweh. And of course, we know that Adonai has a way, and that if you break his way, if you leave his way, there are consequences. There are consequences for leaving the way. In fact, one of the biggest consequences of leaving the way was what we call the flood in Noah's time. Now, remember, there was a way of doing things that were right. They knew what that way was. But violence took over, sin took over before the flood, and the way of Yahweh before the flood got so bad that Adonai destroyed that age, that world, that lifestyle of those people by bringing the flood. You know, you don't discipline people. You don't get mad at people. You don't judge people if you haven't given them a way that they need to follow. So it's important for us to understand that the way of Yahweh started with Adam and Eve, and it has continued from that time. Adonai taught them things, and there was things that they knew automatically. They knew by what Adonai had put into them, by the way they were wired. Just like Adam and Eve didn't have to learn how to speak, how to talk. When they were created with the ability to talk to one another, to communicate. There were so many things that they knew that just by the way Adonai wired them, that they started doing that and teaching it to their children and their children's children. The way of Yahweh was taught. Adonai walked with Adam on the cool of the day, and they walked together. And when you walk together, you halacha, you walk in Haderech Yahweh, you teach. That's the way Yeshua taught his disciples, by halacha. He walked with them from here to there. In fact, one time Yeshua walks from Galilee all the way up north to Caesarea Philippi just to ask him a question and to teach him a lesson of who do you say that I am? Who do people say I am? And again, that's when Peter says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim. And so Yeshua, the way Yeshua taught by walking here, walking to Jerusalem, can you imagine 3.5 years of walking with the Master and being able to ask him questions and other people too, and you learn just walking with him, halacha, walking with the Master. And well, there was a blessing and a curse. Now, everything that Adonai gave between Adam and Moses, all the things that Adonai gave to them between Adam and Moses, now Moses writes it down. And when he writes it down, now we have in written form, not just by what Adonai taught Adam and taught their children by discipleship, but now we have a written record. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. If you do this, you'll be blessed. If you don't do that, you'll be cursed. So we have the bracha. Everybody say bracha. And the curse Uklala, say uklala, and the curse. Bracha, uklala, and the curse. And it goes on to say there, and when Yahweh your Elohim has brought you into Haaretz, the land which I give to you to enter and make your own, you shall set the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. And so what they did is here's Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And the blessing, half the priests went over here and half over there. And the blessings were read out loud from Gerizim and the curses from Mount Ebal. And the people were all here. And this is Shechem now, modern Shechem. It's an Arab village today. But this is where Adonai told Moses to tell Joshua and Aaron, you will give the blessing and the curse. And so they read out the blessings here, and they read the curses over there. The blessing, if you obey, the curse, if you disobey. So we are either called to obey or disobey, to be blessed or to be cursed. And again, this is not new with Moses. Why was the world cursed with a flood? Because they disobeyed, because they followed their own way. There was violence. Violence was everywhere. It was like the whole world was like New York City, I guess we should say. And so there was so much violence, so much sin that Adonai had to come and destroy that world. And so the world that we have today is a new world. In fact, the geography that we have today is a total different geography than before the flood. And so what this teaches us is that Elohim has gifted, now this is a gift. This is a gift, has gifted us with free will and the ability to make choices for good or for evil, for blessing or for curse. These are the two roads. These two mountains are like two roads that are presented here, and each Israelite is free to choose. Every one of us has been free to choose. All our children are free to choose. You know, the gift of free will is the gift of love. We don't realize what free will actually does. It gives us, it's the gift of love. And what's interesting is this gift actually, again, began with Adam. It began with Adam and Eve. And Adonai to Adam and Eve says, there is the tree of life, and there is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You choose. Do not eat of this tree. You're welcome to eat of any tree, but do not eat of that tree in the middle, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that was a choice. Now, many people have said, well, Adonai shouldn't have done that. He actually cursed them by telling them that. But watch this. If the choice wouldn't be there, then Adam and Eve would have been robots. If there is no choice, you are a robot and you do what you're programmed to. And so if Adam and Eve with no choice would have said, I love you, Father, I love you, Elohim, he would be programmed to do that. But Adonai put this gift of a choice, the gift of free will, and Adam made his choice. And Adam's choice was against Adonai. Adam's choice was against himself, because the day you eat of it, you shall die. And in a sense, he committed spiritual suicide. Adonai gives here a choice, a blessing and a curse. Everyone is free to obey or to disobey. But every time we obey, Adonai will send blessings. Every time we disobey, a curse will come in. And so part of the thing that we need to really pray about and really learn the lesson, every time we're confronted with something, should I do this? Should I do that? Always remember that from the Word, and again, thank Adonai, we have the gift of the Bible. This book is precious. And in here, we find what life is. We find what death is. And so now we are blessed to have, what does Adonai say? Here I'm confronted with this situation in life, with this. You know, people are asking me this temptation, that struggle. Where do I go to find help? We come here. And when we come here, we know what the answers are. And we obey, and we receive the blessing. We disobey, and we receive a curse. Now, the blessings are there to bless us, to make us happy, to make us joyful. The blessings are there to make us successful. Through Joshua, we find if you follow this, you will have good success all the days of your life. But again, if we don't, there's the curse. And so every Israelite and every one of us is free to choose. Now, this is something we really need to teach our children. We need to teach our young people. You're going to go out in life and you're going to have to make choices. You're going to go out, you're going to meet people, and the people you meet are going to confront you with choices. And you're going to have to make choices, young person. Are you going to choose for Adonai or against Adonai? Are you going to choose to be blessed or choose to receive the curse? So this is of vital importance on our everyday life, our everyday interaction with the world. And of course, we have Chazatan that is constantly bombarding us. The world is constantly bombarding us. But we also have a flesh inside of us that through the years of sin has amassed a worldly wisdom and a worldly way of doing things that even our own mind sometimes is against us. That's why we constantly need to depend on the Word and the Spirit. Adonai has given us His Word. He's given us His Spirit. If we depend on the Word and His Spirit, that's where the blessings come. And so, again, that is from the last of the sermon. Now, we come to the second sermon. And this second sermon, by scholars, has been called the Deuteronomic Code. And so what Moses does in his second sermon, he gets so much from, especially Leviticus, a lot from Exodus, but a lot from Leviticus, and he reiterates it. He reiterates it to Israel there on Mount Nebo and on the far side, the east bank of the Jordan. And he says to him, Ele chachukim va-mishpatim. These are the chukim and the mishpatim. And again, your scriptures probably say these are the statutes or customs or laws or decrees, and there's different English words that are used for those, but there's only two words in Hebrew. These are the chukim. Remember, chukim are statutes or laws, protocols that, I don't want to say don't make sense. They do make sense, but that, we can't understand. It's those laws that say why. If you ever read Torah and you say, why should I be doing that? Why should I not cut my beard? Why should I not do this? Why should I not do that? Or why should I do that? And you don't have you don't understand it, and there's really no apparent rhyme or reason. It's a hukim. The mishpatim are laws that make sense right away. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't commit adultery. We know those are laws that make sense. Now remember, hukim and mishpatim are laws. The Torah is not law. If you remember last week, we put the Torah as an umbrella. And the mishpatim, hukim, idot, and those other ones are under that. So they are laws that are under the instruction, under the teaching of Torah. And again, what is the purpose of the hukim and mishpatim? So that we would be blessed. These are laws that keep us safe. Remember, laws are really made to keep us safe. A stop sign law, a stop sign, a red light is a law. And we really need to be legalistic about that law. If you say, well, it's just, what's a law? And you constantly break it, one day you'll be dead or you'll kill someone because you'll run the stop sign at your leisure. You don't care about the red lights and something's going to happen. Laws are really made to protect us. Every law should. Now, there's a lot of unjust laws, but that's another point. But these hukim, we must keep in the land, Ha'eretz, Israel, what will become Israel. Yahweh, your Elohim of our ancestors, is giving you as yours, and you must observe every day that you live in that country or in that land. These laws are not just temporary. They're just not if you want to follow them, but these are laws that must be kept. Of course, this is a continuous summary of Exodus and Leviticus. We've already seen this. We've already studied these. And a lot of them he adds again because this is 40 years later. Remember, Exodus and Leviticus is 40 years before. And then we have a 40-year period that we don't know what happened in that 40-year period. There is no history of what occurs in the 40-year period. All of a sudden, we leave Egypt, we go to Sinai for a year, we go to Kadesh Barnea. They sin by not going into the land to reconnoiter the land and to give a good report. And then we have a 40-year vacuum. And then, all of a sudden, the end of Numbers and Deuteronomy, we're on the other side of the Jordan. And so it's a continuance. So now, to the new generation, Moses has to give these three major sermons and major teachings. And so today we begin that one. Now, let's go to Deuteronomy 12 at 2. And these are the Mishpatim, Hukim. We have to observe them. The first thing he says, verse 2, you must destroy, completely destroy all the places where the nations you dispossess have served their Elim, on high mountains, on hills, under spreading trees. You must tear down their altars, smash their sacred stones, burn their sacred poles, hack to bits the statues of their gods, their Elim, and obliterate their name from that place. So one of the most important things, that Israel was to do, when they left Egypt, they left the land of idolatry. Many of them had gotten assimilated into that. We see in the 40 in the journey that they had going to Sinai and afterwards. But one of the things that we know is that when they come into the land, they're coming into another land of idolatry. Canaan was just as idolatrous as Egypt. Now, the Canaanites were worse than the Egyptians. The Egyptians we would probably call white-collar pagans, and the Canaanites we'd probably call blue collar or no collar pagans, because they were worse. They killed their children, they sacrificed, they burned, they did all kinds of things that the Egyptians didn't do. Even though the Egyptians were pagans and sinners, the Canaanites were even worse. So one of the first things that Adonai says is, when you come into the land, get rid of everything. When you take this city, take that town, destroy all their gods, destroy everything. Because what the Canaanites would do is they go to the top of mountains, and in the top of every mountain, they would have these altars and these pillars to the sun, to the god of that mountain, to all these different gods and goddesses. And again, smash their sacred stones. These are our sacred stones right there, what they call standing stones. And these were all over the land. And these are, there's a cultic, and again, the standing stones are phallic symbols, and they have all kinds of immoral statues and immoral figurines and obelisks and things like that. And Adonai says to do that, erase their name, obliterate their name from that place. How can I get a lesson from this today with us? When we become believers, it's almost like the Israelites coming into the land and starting up and setting up a home, setting up a town that is following Torah. When we become believers and are baptized, when we are baptized, we give up the old life. We die to the old life. Whether you're a Gentile and you get cut off from the wild olive tree and are grafted to the olive tree of Israel, or you are a Jew and you've been cut off because of unbelief, a cut off tree branch of Israel is just like the branch in the wild olive tree. Both of them have to give up their ways of how they live to be regrafted if you're a Jew, to be grafted if you're a Gentile. A Jew has to give up all kinds of stuff. Can't give away his own race, though. We're not talking about who they are. We're talking about anything that they believed, that they followed, that was false, that caused them to be fallen away, to be cut off from the olive tree of Israel, and the Gentile has to do the same. When we become believers, one of the most important things is we have to get rid of anything in our mind, get rid of anything that we have as objects of our past, any kind of books. If you were in astrology, or if you were in following that religion, Jehovah's Witnesses, or Buddhism, or witchcraft, or whatever you followed, if you were involved in drugs and all that way of life, if you were, whatever you were, one of the most important things that we need to do is clean our home. Have you cleaned your home? Have you gotten rid of everything from your past that was of religion, that was of sin? Some people even have to give up and burn their clothes. Jude talks about that, saying, even hating the clothes that is contaminated by vice. Once you become a believer, one of the things that we need to look at is the idea of what we call the status quo. The status quo is being neutral to your surroundings, neutral to where you are. And there's so much that I really encourage. In fact, many people that come out of the gang way of life, I always tell them, get rid of all that, all that way you dressed, and You don't have to dress that way no more. That signifies a lifestyle for you. You know, wearing that kind of, someone wearing a hat or a jacket or a shirt that is neutral for that person might be okay. But because you're wearing it and that was part of your, persona as a gang member, even your talk, learning how to talk, with, normal speech, getting rid of anything from the past. Those of you, and I always encourage people that are Native American, if you're Native American, there's so much that you have to get rid of. There's a lot of things that we have to get rid of, not just as Native Americans, but many times Gentiles or even Jewish people might like, that's a nice symbol. I've seen coco palis and have or kachina dolls in people's houses and say, well, wait a second, those are occultic. Get rid of those. Those are the God. That's we are told to get rid of everything. When you come into the land, get rid of it. Don't even have it. Don't even mention their names. Obliterate their names from that place. And we're going to see a little bit more of that in a while. But let's clean up our past act or acts from who we were, where we were, what we were, and get rid of everything that needs to be gotten rid of. I know in the past we've had times when we even put a barrel there and we lit it on fire. We told people, bring all the books and magazines, and we had several times when we burned records. And when me and my brother became believers, we burned all our records from the world, all the rock music, and we burned the records, and we burned books, and people even brought jewelry and other kinds of stuff, and we burned it. People brought stuff that I would not even think they would have, and we burnt it or we destroyed it. We would smash them. And these still need to be done today. We even got, because people, if you are a Catholic and you have rosaries and you have statues of the pseudo Mary and pseudo Jesus, because let me tell you, these statues are not Mary and Jesus. Jesus does not have a sacred heart sticking outside his body. We need to, and we smashed all these, and I remember we smashed them, and it took a lot. I still remember the day that I gave up my rosary, and it's interesting. When I went to the service, some really good friends of ours that owned one of the big grocery stores in the South Valley. The grandfather had just done a pilgrimage to Rome, and he went to Rome, and he knew that I was going to be going to the service. So what he did is he bought this real beautiful rosary. The beads were like, not just the regular beads, but they were like out of shape, and they really looked real beautiful. And he had the Pope bless it. It was blessed by the Pope, so that carried a lot of power. And so the Pope blessed it, and he presented it to me in a real nice presentation. And so I had that rosary for a long time. And when I became a believer, that's one of the first things that I started struggling with, because you struggle with these things, because tradition and custom is like a bond. It keeps you trapped, and it keeps your mind trapped. And I still remember the day, and we were off the coast of Vietnam, and it was a really hot day, and things had occurred, And so I had been trusting in Adonai, had been praying the rosary, and Adonai had been convicting me, and some brothers had been, encouraging me. So I went to the forecastle of the ship, the front, the tip of the ship, in front, and I got it, and we were out there in the water, and I got it, and I threw it out. As soon as I threw it out, you know what's going to come? Guilt. What if I did the wrong thing? And so I threw it out, but you know what? I felt so free that I did not have to depend on man's religion and man's prayers. We could, again, just come before Adonai. And I threw it in the ocean. So right outside of Haiphong Harbor there in the Tonkin Gulf is a rosary that was blessed by the Pope. Anyone living there, I know there's a lot of Catholics in Vietnam, so it's off of Haiphong Harbor there. If you want to go get it, you're welcome to get in the water. But there's a lot of snakes there. You should see all the, well, that's another story. Well, anyways, we got to get rid of all this stuff. Now, let's go to verse 4. Not so are you to behave towards Yahweh your Elohim. You're to destroy everything of the Elim of the pagans. But that's not the way you're to act towards Yahweh your Elohim. You must seek Yahweh your Elohim only in the place he himself will choose from among all the tribes to set his name there and to give it a home. You know, one of the things that in the ancient world they had places, amakom, hamakom, the place that was important to Yahweh and to his ways. But the pagans counterfeited that, of course, and they had their places where they're the Baal of this mountain or the Baal of that mountain or the Baal of that grove of trees or the Baal of this, the Lord of this. And the word Baal means Lord. Another word in Latin, the word Baal in Latin is patron. Anybody know what a patron is? In Spanish, the word patron means boss. And that's what a patron is. That's what a lord is. A lord is a boss. And the word Baal is a Semitic word for boss, for lord. By the way, Baal is also it's not a negative term unless it's used for the gods of the pagans. The word Baal means also a master. Like your landlord, your Baal that you rent from is your Baal. The word Baal is also the Hebrew word for husband. The Hebrew word for husband or Semitic word for husband is Baal. And so the Baals, the lords, the Baal Zephon, one of the gods of pagan gods with Baal Zephon. He was the husband of these people, and he was their boss, he was their lord, he was their patron. By the way, the word patron has come to patron saint. Some of you ever heard the term patron saint? What they did is they got rid of the pagan patrones, patron holy ones, patron saints, because remember, to them, those are holy ones. And then they just gave names of Christian saints as patron saints, and that's your patron. So if you're born on El Día de San Juan, St. John Day, then John is your patron. And through him, you have power. And if someone has le dieron el ojo, was given an evil eye, only a Juan You guys remember those traditions that we've had? Those are pagan traditions, and they've been infiltrated. We need to get rid of all that. No, you must not behave towards Yahweh your Elohim. You must seek Yahweh your Elohim in the place which he will choose from among your tribes, there to set his name. His name is in that place. And give it a home. That is where you must go. So one of the most important aspects of Hebrew thought, one of the most important aspects of Hebrew thought is a centralized place for worship, sacrifice, and for moedim. Now, when they crossed the Jordan, of course, they went to Gilgal, and they were going around to Shiloh. They set up the tabernacle in Shiloh, and then from there, it went around until the ark came back to Jerusalem, and by the time of David and Solomon. And so it was Solomon who built a place in Jerusalem. Jerusalem became the place where Adonai gave his name a home. And to this day, Jerusalem is the place, the only place in the whole world where the name of Yahweh makes its home. Makes its home in the physical. In the physical. And so Adonai always liked to centralize his people. He doesn't like his people scattered. When you worship Adonai, he likes people to come together as one family. The family of Israel, the olive tree of Israel, is one family. It's made up of 12 tribes, but it's one family. And so this is one of the most important things that we see here, that Jerusalem now becomes that place where Adonai gave his name a home. Now, this centralized place is where the only place that they could sacrifice. From this time, again, Moses on the other side of the Jordan, the east side by Mount Nebo. They haven't entered the land. Moses is going to go home to be with Adonai, and Joshua is going to take over. But from Joshua's time to David's time, the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant was in Shiloh, and then the Philistines took it and then came back to Jerusalem. But there was no place. Adonai hadn't chosen a place until David. And through David, Adonai chose Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, to be the place of worship, the only place you could worship, the only place you could pray, the only place you could sacrifice, and the only place for the Regelim Moedim. All other places. Now, you could do Pesach around Jerusalem. You couldn't do Pesach in Galilee or any place else. It had to be where you could sacrifice in Jerusalem and then take your Passover lamb to your home, and it had to be within traveling distance. But all the regalim had to be where? Jerusalem. You couldn't go anyplace else. You could only do sacrifice. You couldn't do the Passover lamb any place except Jerusalem. The Moedim are Jerusalem-centered. In fact, our calendar, this is a very important lesson for us. Our calendar is Jerusalem-centered. The calendar is not centered in Albuquerque. It's centered in Jerusalem. It is Jerusalem that decides when the new moon is, not Albuquerque, not when you see it. Not when, most of the time, a lot of times it's seen in Australia first. Australia sees it. Sometimes, in fact, several times it's been seen in Albuquerque before it's seen in Jerusalem. But we don't go by when we see it. We go when it's proclaimed in Jerusalem, because it could be a day difference. And we've had people doing Passover and others a day different than what Jerusalem is. I believe, and we're going to see this in a while, what I call Jerusalem primacy. Jerusalem primacy. And so for the Moedim, you would go over there and you would rejoice. Jerusalem is the place of rejoicing, the place where you would bring your sacrifices and some of your tithe, some of your offerings, you could eat yourself. Some of them were given to the priest. In fact, some of them only the shoulder was given to the priest, the cheeks were given to the priest, and the stomach was given to the priest, but you would eat the rest of it. The rest of the carcass, you would go and you could barbecue it, you could eat it wherever. And so most of what's over here in chapter 12 has to do with the centralized place of worship in Jerusalem. And of course, there in verse 13, take care you do not offer your holocaust in all the sacred places you see. Only in the place that Yahweh chooses is from one of the tribes may you offer. So even you couldn't sacrifice. Now the pagans sacrificed everywhere. So if you see that there's an altar over there, and it's an old pagan altar that hasn't been destroyed, you can't go sacrifice. You can't use it. That should have been destroyed. The only place of sacrifice, the only place of rejoicing in the Moedim was Jerusalem. Now, it says in verse 15, still, whenever you want to, you may slaughter and eat flesh in any way, in any of your towns, as much as the blessing of Yahweh affords you. Clean or unclean persons may eat it, just as you would a gazelle or a deer. Only you must not consume blood, but pour it into, like water, into the ground. Now, this is eating meat. You could eat as much meat as Adonai blesses you. You could eat as much meat as you want to. You could slaughter your beef. You could slaughter your cow, your sheep. You could slaughter a deer, a gazelle. You could eat as much as you want to of those animals. And whether you are in a clean state or an unclean state, you could eat and slaughter and eat any of those animals. But the injunction is the blood of any animal always has to be poured to the ground, and we must never eat blood. We must never eat blood. And so that's one of those injunctions about that. In fact, that also is down at the bottom. Go down to verse 20 again. If you want to, you could eat, you slaughter. But it says in verse 23, only take care you do not consume the blood, for the blood is the life, and you must not consume the life with the flesh. Now, what is this saying? Why should we not eat blood? The reason we should not eat blood, it says, is that the blood has the life. Now, the word life there is the word nephesh. The word nephesh is the word soul. So your soul is in your blood. The soul of an animal is in the blood. The soul of a person is in the blood. So we must not consume flesh with soul in it, with their soul. And the pagans, they knew that the soul of the person or of the animal was in the blood. So what the pagans would do is they would actually drink the blood, especially drink the blood of their enemies. They would kill their enemy, and they would get blood from the enemy, and they'd eat it. Why? Because that's their soul. This was a valiant warrior. I killed him but he was a valiant warrior and he was strong, so I'm going to get some of his strength. Same thing with an animal. You killed an animal, a wild animal, you would eat. Sometimes they would eat the heart so that they could say, I have their vitality, I have their life, I have their soul into me. So what Adonai is warning us against, the pagans would actually want that because they wanted that person's soul, that person's vitality, that person's life. In fact, there's, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's people, especially in California, for some reason, California has a lot of, is weirdo's a good word for it, that have a lot of different cults. And there's a lot of people, even businessmen and lawyers and other people, that they get blood from babies and they drink it because they feel that gives them life. So that's going on today. That's not something from paganism in the past. That's pagan, that's California paganism today. And so Adonai does not want us to eat blood. The soul, the nephesh of a person is in the blood. And again, Jerusalem, verse 27, Jerusalem is the place that Adonai has given us. And so we need to be Jerusalem-centered. Now, starting from verse 29, again, chapter 13 should have started with verse 29, but they didn't do it. So verse 29, when Yahweh your Elohim has wiped out, annihilated in front of you the nations. Remember, Adonai's done it in front of you. Even though he sent them to do it, Adonai is the one that does it. That you are to dispose, and when you have disposed them and made your home in that land, be careful you are not caught in a trap. Do not imitate them once they have been destroyed in front of you, or go inquiring after their gods, saying, how did these nations worship their gods? I will go and do the same. This is not the way for you to behave towards Yahweh your Elohim. For Yahweh your Elohim detests all this and hates what they have done for their gods, even burning their sons and daughters in the fire for their gods. And so do not inquire about cults and false religions. Here's all these cults, all these false religions, paganism. When you go there, you've destroyed them. Once you are set free, whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Once you are set free, and you are clean, and you've gotten rid of all the junk, not just repented, gotten rid of sin, but gotten rid of what got you into sin, or the effects, or the trinkets of sin, or anything, the clothing of sin. You've gotten rid of that. Don't go back. Don't go back even inquiring about the cults. I wouldn't definitely encourage many of you not to be involved in trying to find out, what do the Jehovah's Witnesses teach? What do the Mormons teach? What do these, one of the things that in seminary and in Bible schools, we've had classes on some of these things, or we've taught on some of these things, or they come knocking on your door and, do you want the Awake magazine? Or, these two boys come knocking at your door. Don't give them the time of day. Speak to them, share with them, especially if you're new. Now, if you're very, very, and I would say very, very mature and know your word, I would encourage you, even then, caution you, be careful how you witness to them. I've known many people that have inquired of what, even in Judaism now, I encourage people, do not get involved. In fact, some people says, is it okay to study about Kabbalah? I say, no, don't even ask about what do they believe. Don't even go there. Because people have gone there. And there's a congregation down the road that is a cult. And they were part of the Messianic. And now they're a cult. Why? Because they've gotten involved in what they call Kosher Kabbalah. And they're involved in all these weird stuff. And my heart breaks for them because I know some of these people. And they're inquiring about how do these people do that and how they do that. We should not, Kabbalah, Mishnah, Torah, Talmud, don't get involved in Mishnah and Talmud. Don't get involved in all those things. Or all the other books that they have, the book of Enoch or the book of Jasher. Don't even go inquiring over there. Don't go there. Those are false religion. Kabbalah is not kosher, can never be kosher, just like a pig could never be kosher. I eat kosher chicharrones from that pig. No, you can never, that's a kosher pig, because it's not in a bad pan. It's, we wash it every day. No, you can't eat it. No matter how, you can't eat it. Kabbalah is not, you can never kosher Kabbalah. Never. You can never kosher Talmud. You can never make it fit. Only the word of Elohim. Like Paul tells us. Paul tells us, keep to what is written. Keep to what is written. 1 Corinthians 4. Keep to what is written. Chapter 13, verse 1. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Can everybody understand that? Everybody say that. 2 plus 2 equals 4. 2 plus 2 does not equal 3. 2 plus 2 does not equal 5. All I command you, you must keep and observe, adding nothing, adding nothing to it, and taking nothing from it. Several times throughout Torah and Tanakh and the end of the book of Revelation, we are told, do not add, do not take away. Do not add, do not take away. If you say 4 is truth, then 2 plus 2 will never equal 3 or 5. Torah is 2 plus 2 equals 4. And we must keep that. That'll never change. No mathematician could change that. That is true. That is a fact. And so it's important that we learn not to add. And here's where I say, like a lot of people say, well, you're coming against the Mishnah or the Talmud. Why? Because they add and they take away. They add to the Torah and they take away. They tell you, just like Yeshua. Excuse me, just like Yeshua. Yeshua was doing something on the Sabbath. Yeshua was picking corn one time, picking grain. And of course, they came against him because he was working. Another time, because they hadn't washed their hands their way, their additional way. Yeshua calls that the leaven of the Pharisees, the teaching of the Pharisees. Paul uses a little harder word. He calls it dung, the dung of the Pharisees. And so all this stuff that's been added or taken away, we don't need to be involved in that. If Adonai did not put it there, we don't have to follow it. If Adonai, if we needed it, Adonai would have put it there. He would have told us, and we're going to see a couple of these points there. Now, let's go to verse verse 2. Um, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and offers to do a sign or a wonder for you, and the sign or wonder comes about, and if he then says to you, come then, let us follow other gods, other Elim, whom you have not known, and serve them, you are not to listen to the words of that prophet or to the dreams of them that dream. And so one of the things that Israel was going to, Adonai is warning him, and Yeshua warned us, and Paul warned us, is that there's going to be inducement for other ways. Inducements for even other Jesuses, or other spirits, or other gospels, other religions. And watch how it starts. If a prophet, if a so-called prophet, I would say today, if a so-called prophet were to come and tell you, or do a sign, a wonder, a miracle, that person got raised from the dead. That person got slain in the spirit. Oh, look at this, it's raining gold. Anyone that does a miracle, a sign, a wonder, and all of a sudden it happens, it's a sign and a wonder. And then he says, but let's follow the God that actually gave it to us. Let's do it this way. Let's follow this God, that God. Do not follow them. Do not go after them. You know, one of the things today that we are living in, we're living in a time of what I call false signs and wonders, especially on TV. You know, I was listening to a gentleman from Africa, and he was an evangelist from Africa. And he says one of the biggest problems in Africa is that you have all these people that have grown up with shamans, have grown up with witch doctors, have grown up with the spiritual, the demonic, what we would call the demonic, they might call it their gods. And they grow up with all that. And then people from the United States, all these big, international prayer ministries or international healing ministries, these big time evangelists that live in multi-million-dollar homes, and you know who I'm talking about. And they go to Africa, and instead of bringing the word of repentance, the word of this, and the word of getting away from that and doing this and following Yeshua, and they go with signs and wonders. And all of a sudden, all kinds of signs and wonders occur over there. And I've always thought, why is it always over there? Well, what this guy was saying is that over there, these people, these evangelists are in fertile ground because of the people, what they've grown up with. They're not looking for a preacher. They're not looking for a man of Elohim. They're not looking for someone who's going to come and teach them. They're coming for a witch doctor. And these people see these men as witch doctors, as shamans, as people that he's going to help me with this, and I'm going to do this. And I don't have to believe. I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is do what the man says rather than what the word says. I see that in America today. I see that among many people. A lot of people want instant healing, instant this and instant that. They want someone to take that problem away. You know, most people don't need counseling. They just need repentance. We don't need counseling. We need repentance. We don't need all this stuff. We need what the Word says to live right, to walk right. Then, if we follow Torah, we will be successful. We will be healed. None of those plagues of Egypt will attack us. We learned last week. And so we need to follow this way. And so if they do that, We are to avoid them. Yahweh, your Elohim, is testing you to know if you love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your soul. Again, the gift of love. Are you going to follow what they said or follow what he has already written here? Who are we going to follow? All these big name people? Or are we going to follow what it says here? Because let me tell you, much of what they teach is wrong. Yeah, they'll teach good stuff. But remember what I always say about rat poison. Rat poison might be 99.99% good stuff, stuff that the mice love, but that 1% toxin is what kills you. And that's why we shouldn't be inquiring. That's why we shouldn't be involved in all that stuff, going here and there. Because, sometimes we go here and there, and I've had people that, they're always everywhere. And then they get a little from here, a little from there, a little from here, a little from there. And what they might get over there might be the toxin. And all of a sudden they're following all these, word of life preachers or whatever, all the good words they want to say, and all this kind of stuff. And then they don't know the word. They don't know. They are not following the ways. And they don't care. They don't care if they know Torah or don't know Torah. Everything, all the sermons are built so that they could suck from you finances. They could suck from you and be able to have authority over you. There's all these people that are, in fact, be careful, all these people calling themselves prophets and apostles. There's all kinds of prophets and apostles nowadays. It's growing. They're not prophets and apostles, and especially if some of these prophets and apostles are women. Because remember, Adonai has said already in his word that Adonai does not allow a woman to be a pastor or have authority over the men of the congregation. Right away, if you go to a congregation and you have a woman in the pulpit, that's a false congregation automatically. And they said, well, we're following Adonai. Well, what does Timothy say? What does the whole word say? If you look at the whole word, the Torah, from Genesis to Revelation, what does the whole thing say? Not just one passage that you might use, but what does the whole word say? And so we have to be careful by people. Now watch what it goes on to say here in verse 7. If your brother, the son of your father or of your mother, or your son or your daughter, or even the wife you cherish, or a friend whom you share your life, if one of these secretly tries to entice you, come, let us serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, gods from among those of the people, far or near. What are you to do? It says something very important. It says, you are to kill him. You are to kill him. Now, definitely, we're not going to do that today. Please do not do that today, because remember, and always remember this, the Torah was given when there is a priest, a high priest in Jerusalem, when there is a Sanhedrin, and when there is a king. And in the land. We are not in the land. Even the land doesn't have a king. Even the land doesn't have a high priest. Even they don't have a Sanhedrin. So this applies. And it'll apply in the millennium, by the way. If anything like this would happen in the millennium, these people would die. We don't have that authority because some commandments are for everywhere at all time. Some commandments are specified. And this commandment is under the jurisdiction of what we would call today the Sanhedrin, which we don't have a king, which we don't have It is your duty, it says, that you must examine it and inquire most carefully. So if you see someone teaching, it says it's your duty for you to examine it. Now, what I would do is we have the authority of excommunication. We have the authority of excommunication. We have the authority to say to this person, whether it's immoral, or if they don't want to repent, or teaching false doctrine. We've already been told by Paul, we've already been told that we have the authority to excommunicate. Yeshua said, excommunicate. And whatever, by the way, that verse, Matthew 18 and following, whatever you bind, whatever you all together as a body, the church as a body, bind on earth, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loosen on earth will be loosened in heaven. So Adonai will stand with the body if they excommunicate someone who is teaching false doctrine. Now, we've done that with people that have taught false doctrine. And anyone who would teach false doctrine, we would have to do that. Let's see. If the town is taken in false religion, we also have false funeral practices there in chapter 14, verse 1. And again, a reminder of Israel's identity, who you are, and all the things that Adonai has given us. You are his very own people from all the people on earth. And I am really running out of time here. If you would give me a few more minutes here. Or one of two last things that we're going to talk about is living a kosher lifestyle. Not the word kosher is not the word to use. We use that because that's common today. The word kosher means fit. If something is fit or something is not kosher, not fit. Now, today, everybody uses the word kosher for all kinds of things. The word should only be used for food. And now, some people say, well, is that a kosher Torah scrolls you have or not kosher Torah scrolls? Or is this kosher or not kosher? No, we're not talking about anything else. We're just talking about food. Deuteronomy 14:3 says, you must not eat anything disgusting. You must not eat anything abominable. You must not eat anything revolting. Anything revolting should not be eaten. And then, again, if you want to go through these in Leviticus 11, I'll encourage you to go through Leviticus 11 to give you what is tahor and tamai. Everybody say with me, tahor and tamai. Tahor is something that is clean, an animal that is clean, acceptable to eat. The word clean and unclean are not good Hebrew translations. The word acceptable or unacceptable are better Hebrew translations for tahor tamai. Same thing with presentable, not presentable. Presentable food that is presentable is what we would call clean. You may eat this, you may not eat that. And the question to ask is this food or not? Tahor, meat, is food. To my meat is not food. It's not food. So pig is not food. Shrimp is not food. To many people, they would make it as food, but it's not food biblically. So do not eat anything that is tamai. We only eat what is tahor, what is acceptable. A sheep is acceptable. A chicken is acceptable. A dove is acceptable. Even crickets are acceptable. But pigs are unacceptable. Dogs are unacceptable. Cats are not presentable to eat. And so this is something, again, we've studied that in the past, and if anybody have any questions on any of these, on a Wednesday night, we could do them. Now, there's two problem passages here that many people look at. Verse 21, it says, you must not eat any animal that has died a natural death. So if an animal has died a natural death, or what we'd call roadkill, if an animal has been savaged by another animal, we are not to eat that. We are not to eat that. It's unclean even if it's a clean animal. If a sheep has been strangled, in fact, we can't eat a sheep that has been strangled, only if it has been slaughtered by a knife. An animal has to be slaughtered by a knife for it to be eaten. And so if it's not slaughtered properly, it is not kosher. It's not fit to eat. It automatically becomes unclean, even if it's from a clean animal. Now, what do you do with that kind if you find roadkill, or if you have an animal that has died a natural death, or someone strangled your sheep and it's dead, or, a chariot ran over it back then and we call it roadkill? What do you do with that? It's not kosher for you, but you could give it away. You could sell it. You could give it to a pagan. Pagans could eat that. A lot of times we get food here, and sometimes, someone gave us some food, and in the food was 3-4 cans of spam. Spam. Now, spam is not kosher. Spam is not kosher, correct? Okay, so if I go to your house, I'm not going to find a spam can, right? But what do we do with the spam that we have here? I'm not going to give it to you guys, but if someone comes and they're not believers, and sometimes we find people out there that are asking for food, I'll give it to them because they could eat it, but I can't. And I always remember that. What's kosher for you, what Adonai, what you want, what you need to eat, it must be kosher. But remember, we are not the Holy Spirit. If you live in a house, and I always remember, and this is a very important lesson. If you live in a house with an unbeliever, and they want to eat spam, or they want to eat your wok, they could do whatever they want. We've had problems where one of the spouses has become very hyper religious on this, and say the wife is not a believer and she wants to eat, something, go to a restaurant and she wants to have a shrimp cocktail, and they've gotten into fights that you cannot have that. Well, no, they could. They could eat whatever they want. They could do that, but you don't partake. Remember, they can't force you to eat their food, but you should not force them to. You know what I'm saying? Vice versa. And we need to, again, that's one area where we need to show love. And that's not just because, remember, every one of us is at a different level, and we're growing. Sometimes that not only has to do with food. I've had people say, well, my husband listens to unkosher music. Unkosher music? Oh man, what are they doing? They must be listening to, one of those singers that do bad rapping. And no, he was listening to Johnny Horton. Well, that's not kosher. It's not biblical. It's not Christian music or messianic music or old-time hymns. It's not that. But a lot of times we try to make people to be where I'm at. you're not where I'm at. I'm not where you're at. And there has to be a sense of tolerance sometimes with where we're at or where someone else is at. And this is one area where I would caution everyone that has children that are not believers. You have a child that's not a believer and they're eating spam. That's between them and Adonai. Now with the little ones, we should bring them up in the way. But remember, sometimes people become believers, and we've lived a non-kosher lifestyle for years, and now all of a sudden the law comes down. Husband, you cannot have that no more. And again, causes problems. So let's be careful with that also. The regalim, I lost all my time. And the feasts are celebrated in Jerusalem, the regalim moedim, here in chapter, we're going to talk about the Shemitah too. And chapter 16, Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, counting of the weeks, Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Sukkot, the regalim, the pilgrim feast 3 times a year, all the menfolk. That's chapter 16. Go ahead and look at it. But as we close, remember the Fall Feast Calendar 2022. Now the 6th month starts on 8/27/22. 8/27/22. Is that a week from now? Was that last week? That's today. So today in the Rabbinic calendar, the 6th month of Elul began. But for us, we don't know when it's going to be. So from now, the conjunction was tonight and last night and tonight, the conjunction. But from tonight on, start looking for the crescent. Now again, we have an advantage that we could go see when Jerusalem sees it. Okay, 8 hours later, we will see it. But again, if it's proclaimed in Jerusalem, it's the 6th month. If it's not, it'll be the next day. So this is a 29-day month. But again, it could be the 30th. So be looking for that. And so this coming Friday, is our first of the month, Oneg. So remember, this coming Friday at 6 o'clock is our first of the month, Oneg. And so be ready for that. Again, they follow the conjunction. We follow the silent and the sided Rosh Chodesh. The 7th month, Tishri, Yom Teruah, the day of the blast trumpets. We don't know when it's going to be. They say it's going to be September 26th. We don't know. Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. We don't know. They say October 5th. Chag Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. We don't know. They say October 10th through the 17th. We have to wait for the 7th month, Yom Teruah, on the Rosh Chodesh to see when it's going to be. So stay tuned for that. Now, one thing also I want to say is that we do not follow the Rabbinic Lenten schedule. The Rabbinic Lenten schedule begins today. So for the next 40 days, they are going to have 40 days of Lent. They're going to have 30 days in the month of Elul, and then 10 days in the month of Tishri. So they have a 40-day Lenten period that begins today. So for the next 30 days, they are going to be doing Shuvah. And then what they're going to do is on what they call Rosh Hashanah, which is Yom Teruah. Then that's their judgment day, and the gates are open, and 10 days they'll be open, and then Yom Kippur closes the gates. Everything that they do is, all these things we don't do. So the month of Elul is not a month of Lent. We don't follow Lent. We don't do that. The next actual holy day is Yom Teruah, which will be around September 26th, but again, depending on the sighted moon. And that's the next thing. So we don't blow the shofar for 30 days in Elul. We don't do the teshuvah for Elul. All that is rabbinic. And there's all kinds of stories about the gates are open and that have no basis in Scripture, but are 2 + 2 = 5. 2 + 2 = 5. One of the other verses that I was going to get is, do not boil a kid in his mother's milk. That's another 2 + 2 = 5, but we don't have time for that. And so there's so much that, Scripture is so much, and each Torah, each parasha is so much for us to study, and we don't have time, but I'm just throwing these out for you to now take. The football has been thrown into your hands, and so run with it this week and look at it and study it and go through it. Let's stand. We thank you, Father, for your word, and there's so much. Father, every one of these sections could be a teaching on itself. But Father, I've given your people enough food, enough supplies, enough tools for this week, and for them to go make some dinners for themselves and go do some work with what they've been given, that they might be Bereans and search the Scriptures to see if these things be so. Yeverechecha Yahweh va'ishmerecha, ha'ir Yahweh panav elecha v'chunecha, asa Yahweh panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. And I want to remind you that those of you...
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or TorahUnleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en TorahUnleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.